Hello YouTube and YouTubettes. Here's my third video for my thoughts on professional wrestling and why I'm a fan or can be a fan of it. And in this video I want to talk about when I started getting bored of wrestling in 2015, 2016, directions that I might have gone with some of these characters. And this is just my opinion. Maybe you will completely disagree with what I'm going to say, and maybe some things they could have done to make the shows more entertaining. Now, first of all, a lot of people think that going to a 3-hour Raw was a mistake because it's very difficult to write for a show that long and keep people entertained for 3 hours. In a sense, I would agree with that. But even worse was that for a while, Raw and SmackDown were not separate brands. They had the same superstars and the same storylines. So in essence, you had a 5 hour a week show because it was the same people. And so I really prefer the brands be separate. And a couple things, I think they should look different. I think they should have different styles. I think it's not to take anything away from Vince McMahon, but maybe have completely different people in charge of both shows and even different producers, different, make it look different and different styles and all that stuff, different superstars. Now, as far as Raw being a 3 hour show, there's a couple things they could have done with that. They could have had a 1 hour pre show where they showed highlights and had a talk show of previous things and where it's going and feuds that are building up. Another thing they could have done is create separate. So let's say the tag team could only be maybe only in SmackDown, for example. The women's division could only be in Raw. Because at that time, the women's division wasn't, they were getting there, but maybe have one where it's the women's singles division and then have the women's tag team on SmackDown and the women's singles division on Raw. And I would have, this is kind of hard because maybe there's traditionalists out there, but there's way too many belts. And I think there's 4 singles men's belts. And I think I would have limited to a Raw championship, a SmackDown championship, and a WWE championship, maybe. I'm thinking about this. But basically, you'd have your top guy for Raw, your top guy for SmackDown, and then this guy for the WWE championship that only fights for it at pay-per-views, or something like that, and could appear or do promos in both shows, something like that. And you would have to have won either the WWE, either the Raw championship or SmackDown championship in order to get an opportunity for the WWE championship or something like that. So if Raw was where the singles women's division was, and I'll get into the cruiserweight because I think around that time they started the cruiserweight as well. If you had like segments like split off to where every day the first hour is all about the women, the second hour is all about the cruiserweight, or the cruiserweights is the first hour, the women the second hour, and then the third hour is the men's singles stars, or you divide it up to where it's the same segments every week, and then it's not just sitting through 3 hours, you're sitting through 1 hour of different things. Just a thought. And then in SmackDown, you have maybe the first hour is about the tag teams, and then you get into the singles division, something like that. And so that's just as far as the structure of the shows and what they might have been able to do to make them a little more interesting. But maybe it's better to have just randomly going from one thing to another so that you're not just getting bored with tag teams for 1 hour or whatever. So first of all, I haven't really been watching for the last few years much. I don't know if they still have a cruiserweight division, but I think that there's something they might have been able to do to help make it better. I would have used more of the WWE talent that were cruiserweight size. Now, they did use Neville and Enzo Amore, and I think Mystico was in there, which was good, I think, for that. But I think it was around that time also that I felt that it was time for the New Day to all shine on their own. And I'll get more into what I think they should have done with the New Day, but Kofi Kingston was a guy that I think could have also been a star as a cruiserweight. And then Rey Mysterio was not around at the time, but when he came back, I would have loved to see him in the cruiserweight. And I know there were cruiserweights in NXT, but I feel like if you use the WWE stars that have already been established to help put over these NXT guys, it could have made for a really interesting cruiserweight division, and perhaps it would have worked. But that's just my thoughts. They could have used more superstars. And then when Daniel Bryan came back, now he's been in the, heavyweight and WWE championship level. So I don't know if people would have wanted to see that. But after his first run, when he came back, maybe have him as a heel in the cruiserweights, something like that. But there's other ways you could have helped make the cruiserweight more interesting. The women's division, I think this is one of the few things that got better as I've left it in 2016, and I've continued seeing some highlights and some pay-per-views, but the women's division has completely improved. And I wouldn't change much about that except for one thing, and I'll get into that when I talk more about some other characters and things. But everybody that was in there, I've liked all the stars they pushed in the women's division. The Wyatt family is one I'm very disappointed with how the WWE has buried them time and time again. I don't remember which is first, but Bray Wyatt and Randy Orton had a feud that I think Orton got over on. And then the stupid one to me, the worst one, was how the Wyatt family had a feud with The Undertaker and Kane, and I think they lost just about every pay-per-view match in that feud too, which made absolutely no sense. Number one, The Undertaker and Kane were older, and number two, the Wyatt family had four. I think Braun Strowman was already around. And that was the stupidest mess up that I've ever seen because the Wyatt family should be pushed to top levels. I mean, that was one of the greatest teams ever created by the WWE. Here's what I would have done with those guys. I would have had them gotten over on The Undertaker and Kane. I would have had Bray Wyatt get over on Randy Orton. And instead of making Braun Strowman pushing him as a single star, which I think he eventually came into his own, but when they first started pushing him, he wasn't ready. I think there were two guys in that group that were ready to be single stars: Bray Wyatt and Luke Harper. Luke Harper, oh my goodness, just the looks on his face. I mean, just great. Now he's in AEW, which I haven't really watched, but Luke Harper was an awesome character. He's just great. But I would have made Strowman and Rowan and Strowman a tag team. They come out with the white and the black mask. And I would have created Sister Abigail as a female dead woman, kind of like a female Undertaker. And whenever she made her debut, that's when the Wyatt family really starts to dominate. And I don't see any reason why that couldn't have happened after their feud with The Undertaker and Kane, getting over on them, and then this woman helps bring the women's division to even bigger heights. I think 2015 was when Charlotte Flair, Becky Lynch, and Sasha Banks were really starting to become stars. Asuka, Ember Moon, etc. But what I think would have been cool is so you bring in Sister Abigail, and then the Wyatt family really starts to dominate. You have Luke Harper get the SmackDown Championship, Bray Wyatt get the Raw Championship, Sister Abigail gets the Women's Championship, and Rowan and Strowman gets the Tag Team Championship, something like that. But you kind of have them. What if the Wyatt family sort of defeats the Authority and every show is in darkness? You know how, and whenever Bray Wyatt's matches are like in kind of dim light, what if every show from beginning to end, when they have control and they have all the belts, is all in darkness from beginning to end? And Sister Abigail is now in charge. She's in charge of them. She's really the power behind the Wyatt family. And now that she's there, not only is she in charge of the Wyatt family, she's in charge of WWE. They've defeated the Authority, and so it kind of makes them babyface. But I would say don't make them a babyface, just sort of a tweener. They're still evil. They still may fight heels. They still may fight baby faces, but they're just the Wyatt family. Undertaker's kind of like that, where he could be a face or a heel at any time. He doesn't really have to change, and that's what I would do with the Wyatt family. So, Bray Wyatt could be facing a heel, but Sister Abigail could be facing a baby face. It doesn't really matter. But if you have Sister Abigail dominate in the women's division, win the belt, and it takes, let's say, once Ronda Rousey was ready, like, to be that one that defeats Sister Abigail, and then you find the right person to defeat Bray Wyatt. And so, this is, I think, would have been really interesting. Next is the Shield. I'll talk about them. And up until the time that they split up, and even a while after that, I had no problem with what they've done with the Shield. There's something I would change, but I thought Seth Rollins was perfect as the Authority heel, kind of the brat that used the Authority or hid behind the Authority to keep his belt. Because when the Shield was together, I think Seth Rollins was kind of the weak link. So he kind of needed something to help get him over. And I think Dean Ambrose was the top guy. He was the spokesperson of the Shield and the leader, it seemed to me. And he was probably my favorite of the single stars too. And Roman Reigns, I think, has the look, and they wanted to make him the next John Cena pretty much, but it wasn't working. And so I think after he won the Royal Rumble, I would have turned him heel and made him. Actually, I had this idea as well. It's related to turning Roman Reigns heel. But let's say he has a feud with Brock Lesnar back in 2015-16, whenever that was, for the WWE Championship. And Paul Heyman turns on Brock Lesnar and becomes Roman Reigns' spokesperson. I thought that would have been a perfect fit. So Roman Reigns wouldn't have to talk too much, because I think that was his weakness. And make him a monster heel and let him develop that way. And then maybe after a couple of years of that, he'd get over and be ready to be a top babyface. But other than that, I liked what they did with Seth Rollins, and I liked what they did with Dean Ambrose, but I really would have made Dean Ambrose more of a focus in the main babyface picture, and Roman Reigns more of a focus in the heel picture, and Seth Rollins could still be around what he was doing. So you have three different guys now that all are enemies, and it's not so much that you have a babyface and a heel, they just all don't get along anymore. So that's what I would have done with the Shield. Some other stars, The Miz, I think, is great. He's one of my favorite heels, and I think he kind of went mid-level for a while, kind of got boring, but then he did that promo on Daniel Bryan in the post-SmackDown show and really got back up to top level. Damien Sandow really got over with the crowd. I felt like his tag team with The Miz was at the level of Team Hell No. And it really helped get Damien Sandow over. And I thought The Miz did a great job. And I thought they should have started a singles feud. They may have. I can't remember. And that Damien Sandow should have gotten over on The Miz and then worked his way up towards the top. Now, whether or not he would have been able to keep that momentum and the crowd or not, I don't know. But I thought he had every bit of the talent and the character that I think he should have gotten that chance. As a single star, Damien Sandow's intellectual savior of the masses is one of my favorite characters. And then I think his first tag team was actually with Cody Rhodes, and I'm not the biggest Cody Rhodes fan. Maybe I liked him as Stardust, and I know he hated that. But I felt like if he was going to have an intellectual tag team, that the guy that he could have tagged with would be David Otunga. Now, I don't know if he was still in the WWE at the time, but that would have been a natural fit because he was like a very educated lawyer. So that's just a thought. But Sheamus and Cesaro, I think, was a great tag team, but I also liked them as single stars. And I didn't mind them having their run as a tag team because they were trying to build up a tag team at the time, and it was sort of a weak division. But once they had their run there, I felt like they should have split off. They sort of teased a breakup before they got along again. But I always felt like Sheamus is more of a natural heel and Cesaro's a natural babyface. And I would like to see them again get pushed as single stars. And I think Sheamus is actually starting to once again. But Cesaro is one of those guys that it's amazing what he does. At his size, he is so strong, to be able to do what he does with the Big Show and things and lift up as heavy and do the things he's able to do. And so you could do something more with that. There's another tag team that I think they should have called Febreze, Fandango and Drew Brees or whatever. That I think not Drew Brees. I can't remember, but anyway, they should have called him Febreze and been sponsored by Febreze. But but I did like I saw some of their detective gimmick. I didn't get to see all of it because by then I wasn't really watching, but I saw some of it and that looked really fun. Some of the newer guys that were coming in from like TNA and stuff was, and I'll quickly mention the Hardy Boys because I never really saw the Hardy Boys when I was watching the shows, but I saw highlights of the Hardy Boys and never knew like their storylines or anything, but I thought these guys are stars. There's something different and unique about them. They're great performers in the ring. They have a unique look. And then all of a sudden I saw the broken Matt Hardy gimmick that was on videos with TNA, but I saw them on YouTube because I never really watched TNA. And I thought that was one of the best stories of the year in wrestling. And if they would have been able to continue to do those kind of videos when they were in WWE, just let Matt and Jeff have creative control and do their promos that way and sort of build them up towards the Wyatt family or even towards Rowan and Strowman, because I think they would have been the tag team. That would have been a really cool feud. But they did end up feuding, sort of, and then they teamed up Matt Hardy and Bray Wyatt, which I don't know that they did as good as they could have done with them. Other stars that came in that I think that I really liked were AJ Styles. Shinsuke Nakamura should be a top level guy. A lot of people think he can't be because he doesn't speak well, but he doesn't need to speak. He's just got a cool look. Let him just be him. Let him just make his faces and his interesting look and do his thing, not necessarily have to be on the mic. Could have been should be a top level men's star, in my opinion. I really like Samoa Joe and Baron Corbin. And both of those guys, I think, are going to be or should be top level eventually in the WWE. Some of the ones that have gotten pushes that I'm not as big of a fan of are Bobby Lashley, Kevin Owens, Jinder Mahal, and Rusev. Now, Rusev was interesting because the spokesperson, I really liked Lana, but all of a sudden she lost her accent, which is kind of weird. But Lana was a really good spokesperson for him, and I think he had potential. I think all four of them have potential. I just don't think they were used well, and the way that they were used kind of all bored me. And finally, I'm going to talk about the New Day, but I'm going to talk more about them in the next video because I'm running short on time. And the next video, I'm going to talk more about racism in the WWE and just how the last and really the only top face of the company that has African roots is Dwayne Johnson, The Rock. And I want to talk more about other people that I think should have gotten the top belt over the years. I'm not talking about the SmackDown belt, the heavyweight championship or whatever, but I'm talking about the top guy for a while. So we'll talk about that, and then I'll get to the New Day, because I think Biggie Langston is a guy that I think should be, among the top stars already. He should have been there several years ago. So I'll finish part 3 here, and part 4 will be more about racism.